Welcome to Pimpy's Investment Chat, where we keep investment talk simple. And here's your host, Pimpy.
What is going on out there, peeps? Man, what could the United States and the rest of the world learn from what's going on over there in Canada? If anything, what could we learn? Oh, a whole lot. And people better wake up and pay attention. This is a test run. There's no doubt about this is a test run, what they're doing. And what we're going to go over here in just a moment, I want you to really think about this. I spoke so many times about the central bank digital currency. I want you to think about that. What I've said about the central bank digital currency, about their ability, the government's ability to control it, to pick and choose where you can and cannot spend your money, and how you spend your money, and who can spend the money, because it's already happening. Yep. Before we get started, give me a big old thumbs up for this one. And if you're not a subscriber, please do so, because when you do, it helps out the channel, and I surely do appreciate it. And oh, howdy, you better be buying gold and silver right about now, because I was not kidding about a bank run. Yes, a possible bank run. It's starting. So when you go to buy gold and silver, consider getting it from our friends over there at Money Metals Exchange. The link is down below in the description. If you are a first-time buyer and you spend more than $100, use promo code Pimpy, P-I-M-P-Y, and get a free half ounce of silver. First things first. Conservative private members bill takes Bank of Canada attacks to the next level. They're calling this a conservative attack. And what are the conservatives over there in Canada asking for? Yeah, they want their central banks to have auditors on there, not one, but two. They want to know what the heck their version of our Federal Reserve is doing in Canada. They want to audit the books because they have a feeling they've been using the money for some real shady stuff. That sounds familiar. I believe Rand Paul tried to get that done here. So you can see right here, it's called the Bank of Canada Accountability Act, which proposes amending the Bank of Canada Act to put the Auditor General of Canada in charge of auditing Canada's central bank. Before even talking about the bill, Mr. Shears thanked these are politicians for their leadership. Since the beginning of the pandemic, the Bank of Canada has massively expanded its money supply in Canada. As a result, we are seeing runaway inflation. That's happening here. What are the odds? The Bank of Canada's decisions have a direct impact on the value of the dollar that Canada earns. Well, that's crazy, because that happens here too, as well as it does the rest of the world. He added in the news release issued by the Conservatives in conjunction with the bill's introduction. With inflation running at historic highs, this kind of oversight and accountability is needed more than ever, as we should here in the United States as well, and so should all countries that have these kind of banks. Scheer told the House that the Bank of Canada has a special exemption from the peer review of the Auditor General, leaving the impression that perhaps the bank's finances, assets, holdings, and operations are hidden from scrutiny. Well, that's crazy. We have the same thing here. It says, in fact, the Bank of Canada Act already requires that the central bank have not one but two independent auditors selected by the federal finance minister and requiring approval by the cabinet. So it looks like this law statistically has a chance to pass. Now, remember I keep telling people, you guys better be careful. Better be careful that there's not a bank run. And if they do a bank run, guess what happens? You could get stuck with the bail-in. See, a bank run is when people start running to the bank trying to get their money out because they're panicking over something that's being done, something that's being said, and action taken by the government. Well, then the bank has the right to call what's called a banker's holiday here in America, where they just close the banks down and freeze all your money in order to wait for things to calm down. They'll give you access to your money, but it's a very limited amount each day. That's if they haven't done a bail-in. Once they do a bail-in, it's over. So this might be their sneaky way of starting to do bail-ins worldwide. So you guys really need to pay attention. So what has happened? Well, let's go over this. Banks are moving to freeze accounts linked to convoy protests. Here's what you need to know. So if there's tens of thousands of truckers protesting, and here's what the emergency act that Justin Trudeau has just passed. And then they turn around and added powers to this. They just add arbitrarily. No voting, no nothing. They just gave themselves, and that's what's happening here in America. These politicians are just giving themselves new powers that were never there before. The Emergency Act, which, by the way, there's a certain criteria that must be met before you can enact it. And Justin Trudeau was in Parliament. They kept asking Trudeau what criteria was met in order for you to enact the Emergency Act. He does not answer the question because the truth of the matter is he's violating the law. And here's another thing for Mr. Trudeau to keep in mind. 51% of Canadians have been donating to the protesters' funds. But it's about to get ugly. In this Emergencies Act, while the government has a right to freeze the bank accounts of the protesters, and we're not done, then the power extends past the protesters. The companies that these truck drivers represent will also have their assets frozen. They're doing this just with regular banking. What do you think's going to happen when they get the central bank digital currency out? See, I warned you about these things getting ready to happen with the central bank digital currency, but hell, you didn't even have to wait for it. They're already doing it now. But let's listen to this report because pay close attention. This is coming. What you see here in Canada is nothing. This is the testing ground for what they're going to do around the world. Let's listen on in.
Even as police move physically against protesters, there is a giant financial hammer also being swung behind the scenes. What cost could leaders and supporters of the convoy soon face?
Their accounts can be frozen and their funds seized by banks. So this means things like paying those bills, paying potentially rent, any kind of day-to-day financial transactions could be stopped.
Even as Ottawa police warned today that protester vehicles may be seized, new Emergencies Act regulations require any financial services provider to effectively freeze property that belongs to a person who participates in the blockade.
It says property, so not just your bank account, but also your property. Keep watching, it gets worse.
That could include thousands of people, but the action is likely to be most focused on the leaders who have access to funds, some of whom have repeatedly identified themselves on social media. The self-appointed spokespeople like Tamara Litch and BJ Lichter, James Bowder, who came to Ottawa to replace the federal government, former RCMP officer Daniel Bulford, and Pat King, who has railed against what he calls Canada's depopulation of white people. Already, many protesters suggest they've been targeted by financial measures, though there's no indication any banks have indeed yet started to lock accounts.
So that is the government, our Prime Minister, declaring his War Measures Act, the Desperate Measures Act, and freezing my account and many others.
The measures do expire when the Emergency Act ends, no more than 30 days, but banks could still choose to cut ties with individuals after that.
Do they want that person as a client? Because there could be huge risks for the bank.
This is already happening here in the United States. Look what they're doing to Michael Lindell, the banks. Look what they're doing to Trump, the banks. Freeze your bank accounts. Oh, and crypto people, she's going to tell you that they have the ability to go after your crypto. So if you thought that was a safe haven, I think twice.
So they may just decide to shut the person's account down, and that person will have to find another bank or another system to deal with.
It is possible more than leaders could be targeted, potentially impacting mortgages and car loans and just about any payment or account with money or cryptocurrency.
A lot of the people who are attending this protest have family members.
You heard what he said. They can also go after your cryptocurrency.
Are paying bills, potentially paying child support. So they're not just going to affect the people who are being directly targeted by them, but some of the people on their periphery.
Beyond the potential to impact others, some worry this.
And not only that, they have confiscated the GoFundMe account, and they also went after the other type of GoFundMe account. And now they're saying, in addition to that, they're also going to go after those people who donated to support the protesters and freeze their accounts. You will conform or else.
This federal action will only entrench many protesters further.
This protest, to a certain extent, is spurred by this idea of government overreach. It could have the effect of sort of entrenching their ideas and their mindset.
And these are already the hardened, those who believe they are right. The cost of their actions could soon be a freeze of every aspect of their financial lives.
David, thousands of people have donated to the protest. Could they be affected by this?
They could, but it doesn't mean they will be. So the regulations themselves, Ian, are actually quite ambiguous.
Okay, just because, like I said this, they could, but that doesn't mean they will be. That's not the point. The point is they could.
They're quite wide, but government officials have said they will interpret it, they will apply it to really target those key sources of funding, and they'll be looking at...
Look how they said targeted. In other words, those people they don't like, they get to apply this to. What happens if a certain political party gets in control? And the people start complaining about them. Oh, well, you look like one of those rebel rousers. You look like a person who's going to start trouble. Well, we'll just apply the whatever you want to call it act and freeze your account.
At those who are spending the money that's out there to really try to sustain this protest, to keep it going. Those who have already donated, well, a lot of that money is being refunded, and the rest of it is pretty choked, so it's not really about the donors anymore.
All right, David, thank you.
So just take all that in. Take it all in. So let's go ahead and recap. So they can freeze all assets, including your houses, your money, your cryptocurrencies, anything that you have of value, the government can freeze or take from you. If you're a protester, if your protesters are representing any of the companies, so in other words, the companies whose trucks are out there, they can take your assets, your bank accounts, and anything of value from you. If you're donating to the cause, they can go after the donators, freeze your assets, your money, your property, and they'll hold it for as long as possible until they want you to suffer for even thinking about rising up and complaining about what the government's doing. Because that's a real fear. When I spoke about it, people think, no, Pimpy, the white hats are in control, man. It's just clones out there. Okay, well, the clones are kicking people's ass right here. So pay attention to this clone's action. He implemented an emergency act that had a very specific criteria to it, and none of the criterias were met, and he still enacted it. The other politicians started complaining, saying you can't do that. But who's stopping him? Nobody's stopping him. Even though he sees more and more people are coming to join the protesters, now it's beyond that. It's getting bigger and bigger. So what could the United States and the rest of the world learn from what's going on in Canada? If they're acting like this now, what happens when they grab a hold of everybody's money through the central bank digital currency that we know has a expiration date on there, that if you don't spend it by the time, then the money expires and you lose it, and it's programmable. Let that sink in. And having said that one last time, I do want to remind you that if they're going to do that, pull those types of stunts, unless you want to conform and be silenced, you're going to need something outside of the system. Gold and silver is that choice. That's something that you could physically have and physically own. I told you guys that cryptocurrencies are still in the system, and you heard that guy say they could take their money and their cryptos. So cryptocurrencies, finally, once and for all, they are not a safe haven. Gold and silver that you can physically own, physically possess, and physically hide. That gives you options. Think about that. Anyways, that's it for now. Leave your comments because I will come back and respond to these ones. Let me know what you guys think about this, because it's really, this is reality and it's happening. It should make a difference on which side of the political arena you're on, because there is a famous saying, and keep this saying in mind as time goes on. You see, it says, first they came for the socialists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a socialist. Then they came for the trade unionists, and I did not speak out, because I was not a trade unionist. Then they came for the Jews, and I did not speak out, because I was not a Jew. And then they came for me, and there was no one left to speak for me. You see, little by little, they'll just keep targeting groups, and people will support that. until they come for you. This is something to think about. Anyways, hit the thumbs up button. If you're not a subscriber, please do so, because when you do, it helps out the channel, and I surely do appreciate it, and I'll catch you later. I'm out.